One of humanity's biggest problems is that people who think they're wonderful often aren't. And people who are wonderful seldom believe they are. It's nearly impossible to persuade a narcissist of his need to grow. And similarly, it's incredibly hard to convince someone with poor self-esteem of their worth and value. If self-perception were a globe, let's think of it as a globe, with narcissism on one pole and self-hatred on the other, we would say that living on the equator would be most healthy. Living on the equator between the poles of those extremes would enable us to acknowledge and celebrate our virtues and good qualities while also being aware of our faults and limitations. Life on the equator. We've been talking about depression, and you'll remember that we've said the place to start when you are depressed is to what? 3 words. See your doctor. See your doctor to discern if your depression has biological causes, which I ended up doing 2 weeks ago. I've been on an antidepressant for 10 years now, but in the past several months, my mood has just kind of gone down, and my depression, I could feel it just grow worse. So I did what I've been telling you to do and visited my doctor, who tweaked my medication, just a slight little adjustment. And now the sun is rising a bit higher in the sky. It was the Roman poet Horace who in 65 BC likened depression to a black dog following behind him. But some days I think a more fitting metaphor for depression might be a circling vulture, looping circles in the sky looking for its next weakened victim. Don't you be that victim. Get help. Get help. But once we've addressed the biological causes of depression, we have recognized also the importance then of cultivating certain habits and practices to elevate and enrich our lives. And today I want to add to that list is this. You have to like who you see in the mirror. You have to like who you see in the mirror. Not like Narcissus, the young man in Greek mythology who loved no one but himself and loved no one until he saw his own reflection in a pool of water, and then grieved because the reflection could not love him back, and then pined away until he died. When I say you have to like who you see in the mirror, I don't mean it that way. I mean you must respect the human being you are and are becoming, lest you descend into self-loathing and the vulture picks you off. I was up on the town square this past week. It was one of the nicer days this week, and got up into the mid-50s in Danville. And I thought, well, I'll just go for a little midday walk. And so I was up there, and I was walking down an alleyway that the town has spruced up with lights and tables and a mural painted on the brick wall. It all kind of looks vaguely Parisian right there in Danville. It's where all the juniors and seniors go to have their prom pictures taken by professional photographers. Very fancy now in Danville, and so different from when I was a kid, when your prom picture was taken by your mother using a Polaroid standing in your front yard. My mother always wanted to get the entire house in the picture and would stand back so that we were no bigger than little grains of rice. And she would say, "Looky there you are." But I remember the Polaroid camera. That was it's amazing to be able to hold a picture in your hands and not have to take it to the drugstore to be developed. And then by the time you got the picture back, you forgot who was in the picture altogether. What technology. I went to my senior prom, went to my junior prom, skipped my senior prom, and then the year after I graduated, so I was out of school, prom time rolled around again, and our phone rang. Now, kids, you will not believe this, but back when I was a kid, families had one phone that hung on a kitchen wall, and everyone in the family shared the same phone. And one day it rang, and it was a girl I knew who was very kind and sweet, but also very unattractive. And she was calling to see if I could take her to her high school senior prom. And being 19 and caring too much what others thought of me, I lied and told her I was busy the night of the prom, that I couldn't take her. She thanked me anyway and said goodbye, and we hung up. My father was seated at the kitchen table. He asked me who had called. I told him it was a girl asking me to her prom, but that I didn't want to go with her because she wasn't pretty. He said, I heard you tell her you had plans. What are your plans? I said, I don't know yet, but I'll find something. And Dad didn't say anything. He just looked at me with one of those parental looks that said, we raised you better than that. You know the look. Now, my father didn't do that often, but when he did, I knew I had screwed up. And I could not get this out of my mind. It kept coming back to me. And every time I thought about it and remembered what I had said and how I had lied to her, I felt terrible. And then I would feel angry at her for asking me to the prom instead of blaming myself for lying. But for the next week, whenever I thought about it, I just felt guilty. And so I phoned her. Kids, this was back in the old days, when once a year someone who you never saw would leave a big, thick phone book on your front porch. And it had all the numbers of all the people you ever needed to call. It was very handy. You also used it at Thanksgiving for short people to sit on. That's how it was when I was a kid. So I looked up her phone number in that big, thick book, and I phoned her. And I told her my calendar had opened up and I could take her to the prom after all. And she was so excited, not realizing what a rat I was. But I knew a rat when I saw one, and I was a rat, a 5'11", 115-pound rat who should have been honored to go to the prom with anyone. The irony, as I look back on it, was that while I was worrying about her being unattractive, I was the one who was ugly. I was the one being ugly. Have you ever noticed how difficult it is to feel good about anything, about life, about relationships, about anything, when you don't feel good about yourself. Central to our happiness is liking, respecting who we see in the mirror. You have to respect that person. And the only way to do that is to make sure the person you've become is worthy of respect. Self-esteem doesn't come cheap. It must be earned. And while it isn't healthy to perpetually not like yourself, not liking yourself in the right circumstances can be valuable. Sometimes self-loathing can be beneficial and even transformative. This is why we should pay attention to our feelings of self-loathing. When you don't like yourself, it might be because you have learned something about yourself that needs to change. Pay attention always to your feelings of self-loathing. So when I was pastoring in Irvington, we had a young man show up fresh out of college who'd gotten a job at a company in Indianapolis that designed and manufactured bombs. And the pay was really good. And he was happy having such a good job until one night he had a dream of children being killed by the bombs his company made. And he plunged into such a deep depression, such a state of self-loathing that he could barely function until he quit that job and found a job that didn't cause mothers and fathers to weep at the graves of their children. Friends, pay attention as a spiritual, moral, ethical practice. Pay attention to your feelings of self-loathing. When you don't like yourself, when you don't like life itself, it might be because you have learned something about yourself that needs to change. Face it squarely. Face it squarely, and work always to be the best you can be. Sandy, I'm always surprised how our lives run parallel courses. My older brother Doug, was sick for his senior prom and said to his date, "Don't worry, my brother Phil will take you." And she said, "That's okay." But to go to the prom with Madeline would be a joy. She truly is one of the sweetest, kindest persons God ever put on the face of the earth. Friends, look for beauty in your life, but look in the right places and know what to look for. Sometimes the loveliest people are roughened husks outwardly, but inwardly are gentle and kind and wise. See in them the beauty that is within them, and endeavor, insofar it is possible, to be as beautiful as you are able, always, and to everyone. Amen. Turn and greet friends.